Welcome to week 4 of the Oracle Sports Social Distancing Podcast. I'm Oracle Sports Editor Brian Attab. That is Nolan Brown.
Hello.
Okay, perfect. That is a much better intro than the last 2 weeks.
Got it right this time. It only took me 2 weeks or 3.
Or 4, whatever it is. This is week 4 into this experiment of ours, and it's been moderately successful so far, I guess. We're still doing it. We're still here. We've just passed the month mark in terms of lack of live sports in this country. I meant to have the copy of the Oracle from the day after everything was suspended and canceled because I think that was, March 12th, and we're April 15th, the day we're recording this. Obviously, through the magic of technology, this will go out after the 15th. But yeah, we're about 4 to 5 weeks afterward, and I'll still never forget holding that paper and reading what I wrote, just because it was just such a surreal thing to look at. But this has been our reality for the past month or so, and it's finally kind of sunk in. The first couple of nights, or the first couple of days, I would say, after I was waking up, it was like that mindset. It was kind of like I felt like I was at the end of the world, right? And waking up, was just scared to just be up, and I didn't know what the day was going to bring. And I'm not saying things are anywhere close to normal or close to better or at all at this point, but it's the reality, and our new normal has kind of sunk into the point where I'm just kind of waking up like normal at this point. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's certainly a normal thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last game that I covered before everything was done, I think, what was it, a couple nights before everything was shut down? It might have been the day before.
It was the night. We were both there.
Yeah, and it was a USF baseball game, and I talked with Coach Billy Bull after, and he talked about, we got to get ready for, the upcoming weekend, and here's what we got to do. And at that point, we had already a clue that, this would be something, sports would be gone, basically, at this point. USF sports would be canceled, postponed. We didn't know in what sort of how they would be it, but we knew that this would pretty much be it. And so I remember writing that, and I kept telling myself, yep, sports are still going on. And for a while, I didn't really buy into it. I didn't really believe it. That I was like, I didn't want to accept it, basically. And then I woke up the next morning, and it kind of just hit me where it's just like, yeah, they're going to be gone. And then eventually I was like, sports are gone. And for a while, like you were saying, you just woke up like normal. And not really for me. I would wake up at odd hours, and I'd be like, I have no idea what to do. And then I guess now that I've kind of adapted to that sort of a schedule now. So I feel like things are, like you said, things aren't going back to normal, but at least for me, it's like, all right, I'm finding a little bit of a new normal.
Well, and that, by the way, brings up our guest for the week. USF baseball freshman pitcher Jack Jasiak will join us later in the program. But you mentioned that baseball game. I mean, I think the right approach is, if you're writing a game story for any game, pretend that sports are still going to keep going on until they're not. But that's what Derek Sharp told us in the first episode, this first installment of this. He was Mole was giving him that look that, boy, this was a bad loss, and it was. But in the back of Derek's mind, it's like, that's not going to matter tomorrow. But really, what I was saying, it wasn't even a sports kind of thing, that sports are gone. I'm waking up and, oh my God, sports are gone. It's waking up and, oh my God, I felt like we were in the middle of like a biological war, which in kind of a sense, I don't think that's an inaccurate statement to say, but it's almost like you don't know where that next attack is going to come from. And really, it's still not an inaccurate statement, but it was kind of like, I guess, more of a fearful mentality of whenever I woke up in the morning, just not really knowing what's going to happen. But that's since subsided, which, like I said, for better or for worse, it's subsided.
Yeah, it's hard to really tell if things are getting worse, things are getting better, or we're just becoming accustomed to what is happening now. I know my mom is a huge news watcher. She watches the 6:30 David Muir news every single night. And hearing the stuff that's on there, it's like, well, things aren't really getting better. I mean, like, we're seeing it worse and worse and worse, and that kind of, I guess, grounds you in reality of, yeah, there's still something going on out there. And I mean, for the most part, I've been home. I've been, practicing social distancing and whatnot and staying at home. But I also work at Publix part-time. And so I've only been, once a week or something like that. But I've gotten to see firsthand, like, what the real world is looking like. And I mean, about 90% of the people were wearing masks at my store. It felt like it was a weird air about it. It was kind of like you get in and you get your stuff and then you get out. And normally people come up to me and ask me questions. Do you have any of this? Do you have any of that? It didn't feel like that. People just came in, grabbed what they needed, put it in their basket, and then they left. And it was very systematic, and it felt definitely things were different. It felt like things were different. I mean, we had like tape on the floor. It's a certain direction that you can go in the store. Like, you can't, go back through an aisle or whatnot. People still did it, but because that stuff was there, it was like, this feels very different. This is like what the real world is kind of like. And I guess in a way it grounded me, like I said.
To kind of bring it back to sports for a bit here. I know we tried to say last week we'll try to have some happy news to report this week, but in reality, we really don't, because we're finally now starting to see the consequences of the coronavirus and what the lack of revenue means for sports. And we're seeing it in both the professional ranks and in the collegiate ranks, where within the last week, we've seen the XFL lay off all of its employees, or most of its employees, basically have a skeleton crew to keep things day to day, file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and suspend all operations with no intent to return in 2021. Now, what we've heard, it was Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is the reorganization bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is liquidation. So they're filing for Chapter 11, and it sounds like they're looking for a suitable buyer. So it sounds like that there may be a chance we see a reincarnated version of this league in the future. And I think this league would have worked if not for this pandemic. But we also saw earlier this week, so the XFL news happened on last Friday. On Tuesday, Cincinnati announced that it was cutting its men's soccer program due to coronavirus funding concerns going forward. Cincinnati's not the first university to cut a program this I guess off season, you want to call it, in college athletics. I just believe it was Old Dominion cut their wrestling team a couple weeks ago, and I might be wrong on both university and sport, but they basically said it wasn't. If you read their release, it was more, they had done a study on it. They had the virus, the pandemic was probably the straw that broke the camel's back, but more than likely that sport was getting the axe anyway. But if you read Cincinnati's release, it is pretty explicit that this probably wouldn't be happening at least this year, if not for the pandemic. And we heard Vince McMahon with regard to the XFL saying that he was prepared to take a loss for several years to make this incarnation of the XFL work. Obviously, all of that changed with the pandemic and with WWE taking a hit as well. So this is not going to be the first program to get cut when Cincinnati's men's soccer, and XFL is not going to be the only league to shut its doors or teams to shut its doors. So these are the things we're just going to have to get used to seeing the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, because until things can get back to normal and we can really open the doors to fans again, leagues that don't have massive TV deals, the XFL was paying to be on TV, and Cincinnati, we've talked about it, is in the AAC. They're not getting a whole lot of money right now.
Yeah, and it does suck to see this stuff. I mean, like, nobody wants to see this kind of thing, but it's the nature of the game. And it's kind of like you got to get used to the new reality that, yeah, things are going to disappear. Things aren't going to be around. And I guess that goes for anything too. Like, your local restaurant down the road, that might be gone by the time this is all over. You don't know. And that's just kind of the reality of it. We talk about, I guess the casualties of this. I mean, economic casualties really, but with Cincinnati specifically, their soccer program going down. I mean, yeah, they weren't necessarily the best team in the conference. They were usually, second to last or last place in the past couple of years. I think 2016 they finished like middle of the pack. That was like the first time in the conference basically. But again, that's something that in the release they said this probably wouldn't have happened if not for this pandemic. And so seeing something like that is like, man, like this could be it for a lot of different programs. And like we saw it with the XFL, it's very unlikely that it's coming back. I mean, yeah, Chapter 11 bankruptcy might be that they're looking for a new buyer or whatnot, but who's going to be looking for
somebody's got to have the money to buy it?
Yeah, who's going to be in the market for a sports league at this time? I mean, we might not see the XFL for years and years and years. You might see a third incarnation at the same time it took to see a second incarnation of the XFL. So it's just going to be the reality of it. It's not going to be. These are only the first couple of dominoes to fall, I think, and it might be a little bit of a pessimistic view, but it's just kind of realistic how it is.
It's unfortunate, and this is happening before we know anything about the college football season. If we even get like some sort of modification to the college football season where maybe we're playing 10 games instead of 12, or we're playing it in the spring instead of the fall, which will compete more with basketball than it does now, which takes money away from basketball, or at basketball schools takes money away from football. We're going to see this again. And like you said, it sucks. I don't think there's any other way to say it. It sucks to see a program like that have to go away because of this.
Yeah, it's not really oh man, I hope that doesn't happen anymore. It's like this is going to happen, just accept it. And what's interesting is that before this was announced that Cincinnati's program would be no more, we talked with men's soccer coach Bob Butehorn about the week before, and we talked about what would happen, what would be the effects if a football season was canceled or modified in some way, given the amount of revenue that it brings in, and what would those effects be on, I guess, smaller programs or even like Olympic sports across the board. And he said, in a way, I think that the model shouldn't be based on one sport. It shouldn't be one sport. If you remove that from the cog or you change it from the gears, and the whole thing falls apart. And that kind of sheds some light on what's happening now.
Well, this is a direct result of the NCAA paying out to schools less money this year as a result of a lack of a basketball tournament. Now, again, this is just from basketball alone. So imagine when the big sport doesn't get to play, and it's not an NCAA thing. It's our department didn't make as much money as we normally make. And there had been a lot of talk the last couple of years at USF about adding more Olympic sports. And we heard rumblings of what, sports it might be. I've heard a lot of various things over the years. And I think it's very fair to say, I mean, if anything, I don't think that the additions are going to happen. And I hope that's where it stops. I hope that's the only sacrifice that has to be made here, and really anywhere. I don't want any programs getting cut, but I think it's fair to say that we're not getting the programs added that we thought we would at USF, which is very unfortunate. I don't think there's going to be one school that's going to be not impacted by something like this. This isn't like this is happening in a Division III conference or Division II conference or a FCS conference that's cutting a program. This is in this conference, the American. This is in the same conference USF is in. So I don't want to be cynical, but don't think it can't happen here too. And that's, I think, the real scary thing is who knows who's next, but don't think it can't happen here.
Yeah, and going back to, I think it was week 2, I'm not entirely sure actually, I mentioned ECU football. Now that we're seeing something like this manifest, that we're seeing a program be cut, actually in our own conference be cut. I talked about how ECU football is like the pillar of Greenville, North Carolina. I mean, like, yeah, they're not the best football team in the conference or anywhere for that matter, but people go to those games. People love that team so much. And I'm not saying that it will be cut or it will be the first program to be cut, but if we get to a point where they're going to have to cut that program, if they have to cut it, things like that, what does that do to the city? I mean, what does that do to the infrastructure, the economic, I guess, domino effect that happens after that? And like I said, I'm not saying that ECU is getting cut next, but if push comes to shove at that point, later on down the road, what happens in that case? I mean, what's the fallout of that?
No, but I mean, very easily one of their other programs could be. I don't think any program or any university in this conference is going to cut their football program first. Now, if UConn were still a member, they probably would.
Right. Yeah. I'm not saying
I don't
first.
yeah, but I think that we're going to look at probably men's soccer will be the first sport. And if it comes to it in the conference might have to look at it and be like, we don't have enough teams to keep sponsoring this sport as a conference. They're down to, at this point, you lose UConn and now you lose Cincinnati. You're down to 6 teams. There's a lot of potential ramifications from all of this, and it really sucks. So I don't know how else we can really put a bow on that other than just saying, be prepared for a lot more of these stories. Our guest this week is a freshman, or was a freshman, or will be a freshman next year. I guess it all depends on how it works out. Pitcher for USF baseball. He was off to a pretty good start this year before things, well, y'all know what happened at this point. We're joined by Jack Jasiak. Jack, thank you for joining us on the Oracle Sports Podcast. We've also got communications director for USF baseball, Thomas Manzello, with us too. You can see how the sausage is made today.
Yep.
So that's Thomas. And then Jack, thank you for joining us. Looks like you're at home in Spring Hill.
Yep. Just relaxing here. Just staying home and hanging with the family.
How have things been for you the last month or so? Because I think that this week marks a month since everything shut down. What's it been like?
It's been different. Not being out on that field. Shoot. I mean, we all make a joke of it as a team. This is like we had our first spring break in how many years, but I think things are starting to, for me, go back to normal. We kind of stopped thinking about it and we're just taking it day by day, staying home, staying positive and all that stuff. When we look out, you wish you were playing, but no one's playing right now. So, you have to take everything with serious precautions.
Like Brian mentioned, you were having quite a season before everything got put on hold, especially as a freshman. And have you kind of caught your breath basically going from your high school to playing at D1 baseball and playing pretty well, and then now it's just completely stopped? And how has that kind of transition been basically?
Well, the transition was very, very different, going from high school to Division I. I mean, the game speeds up really fast. And, but going along the way, they prepare us so much with doing a bunch of all those inter squads and everything. But, just gearing up for that longer season was definitely, you have to get more mentally prepared, for that longer season. And for it to be taken away was kind of different, because we would have still been playing in high school. I only made 4 starts, so it was a little different. But we're just focusing on the positives now. I mean, it was smart, that we stopped playing. We can't be going around. I mean, this is getting really serious.
I guess a follow up to that would be when everything does go back to normal. I mean, you won't have a full season for next year until next year. But how do you kind of keep that momentum going once you're allowed to do things again?
Yeah, so I know that I'm still throwing here a little bit at my house with my younger brother Jake. But just you got to stay mentally in the game, and every time you go out there, you got to have that bulldog mentality, I think, and that's what I feel like kind of kept momentum up from the fall to the spring for me. And if I can get out and play over the summer, if all this stuff clears up, and having that and getting a little more experience, I think that would really help a lot of guys on the team too, not just me.
I remember it was the game you guys played against Pitt. I remember asking Coach Mole after the game, what precautions you guys have taken. Was it, with regards to the coronavirus? Because clearly the writing was on the wall, but it wasn't so blatantly on the wall at that point. But he basically said, thank God we don't have to be on the road for another couple of weeks. By this point, you guys would have been on the road. You guys kind of feel a little bit fortunate you didn't have to go out on the road before? Because I know I was on the road the week before everything went out, and I did not want to get on that plane to get back home to Tampa after all of that. I don't know what your mentality would have been getting on a plane if we had still been playing.
Yeah, being at home we went to Florida in that fourth week, so it's still kind of like home, right in the state. I feel like that was very, it helped us a lot from staying away from all of it, and as a team, really, we kept up with we knew what was going on, but we didn't know like the impact of it and how serious it was, not until, we saw like the NBA shut down or suspended their season, and then you're like, whoa, this is starting to get kind of real and serious there during that Pittsburgh and it was the Florida A&M game. And then that week they shut it down. But going on, like, if the season were still going on and getting on planes, I think there would be a little, not like a risk factor, but people would be kind of nervous about it. I know families would, at least.
As a follow-up to that, the night after the Pittsburgh game or the Pitt game, I asked Coach Jessica Moore of softball if her team was doing anything differently, as precaution, because I knew you guys had scrubbed down the locker room and we're obviously taking your precautions, but like her precaution, she was saying, we're not high-fiving, we're not doing hugs, we're not doing handshake, all these things that you just kind of habitually do as an athlete. Has you guys been kind of in that mindset yet, or had it not really gotten to that point yet before the season was canceled?
We were in the mindset, but we still kept doing things. We were high-fiving some guys. We were giving ourselves like the elbows or something like that. But I think it's just habit, and we just kept doing it. But we knew what was going on. And
how hard is that? You high-fiving or something for God knows how ever many years, and then all of a sudden you're like, we never really may find it prudent to do that again when you think about it.
Giving a guy a high five or a pat on the back is so habitual for all of us. Or just like we're got 35 guys in a dugout. We're all close to each other, and we all got to know each other like family. So it's you give a guy a pat on the back, you give him a high five or whatever, it's so much of a habit.
Well, and Nolan, I don't want to keep taking questions from you. I'll let you have the next one, but you just mentioned a good point with the dugouts. Obviously, we hear a lot about MLB trying to restart or start its season, whether in Arizona or in Florida, and you see things about them trying to play these games without fans or play them in these biospheres or whatever. But, you forget about just how many people are in such close proximity. What's your takeaway when you see something like that? Do you think it's possible? Just coming from a purely baseball player perspective, can you really play these games without keeping 6 feet away?
It's difficult, but it's ultimately like if those players get tested, and they all test, negative for the disease. I'm sure everyone will be fine then. you know? I mean, because if you don't have it, you don't have it. But I mean, if you have someone that has it, I mean, I guarantee you there's a high possibility of you catching it. But I mean, it's still the game, you know. You're close to everyone, but that's just how baseball is, you know.
Actually, that's perfect, Brian, that you mentioned that, because I'm going to bounce off that question. I know one of the things that they proposed was either playing it in Arizona or in Florida, maybe even having 7 innings, so it's just a little bit shorter, double headers or whatnot. But one of the things that stuck with me is that they proposed having an electronic strike, like a batter's box, basically, which would really kind of eliminate the idea of framing as a catcher. And so based on that, that's something that if they were to potentially implement it, that's something that they can even carry over after this is all done. So what's your opinion on basically having an electronic batter's box per se, and would that change the play of the game?
Me personally, I feel like it'll change the game. I mean, there's so many games within baseball, you know, the game within the game, that I feel like it's taking away from that. I mean, we see it all the time on TV. You know, they have the zones in the box. I mean, that's a catcher's job. I feel like is to present that ball as a strike. You know, and I mean, taking away from that kind of like loses the essence of being a catcher. You know.
So, like I was mentioning earlier, you guys will get your year of eligibility back, and from what we can tell, USF um, is because we've seen some schools come out and say we're not letting our spring athletes come back. I know obviously for you as a freshman, you'd be back anyway, but like the seniors. But it seems like everyone at USF is going to get their year of eligibility back. Do you kind of use something like this, not necessarily as a mulligan, but you got pretty good experience this year. You even got to pitch a couple of innings against Florida, which obviously didn't go as well as your other 3 outings. But I mean, you can't put a price on value. And do you kind of look at this as not a blessing, but, you know, something to take away that it's invaluable experience at the D1 level, and you'll still have 4 years of eligibility left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good for like the whole team. I mean, everyone's benefiting from, you know, everyone gets another year of eligibility back, you know, and it was kind of like a test run. I felt like, you know, we played a couple games in the fall, and then we played, we're close to 20 or 25 almost now. I mean, I feel like it was a test run for all of us as freshmen, because I mean, there were so many of us, you know, playing, and you know, we all learned a lot, and we all felt like we should have done better as a group. But I mean, just a learning experience as a young team. I felt like we're gonna take this, and next year we're gonna learn from all this, and I think we're gonna be the team that we should have been this year.
We heard you before we actually started recording. You were talking a little bit about playing the show and whatnot, and getting some sort of baseball in some sort of fashion. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chinese Professional Baseball League. They're currently playing right now. It's without fans, but it's still baseball. Is that something that you'd be interested in or watching, or is that something that you guys can learn from seeing that?
I mean, it's a professional league, right? But I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, I know that there's Japanese leagues, and I'm sure there's leagues in China too. But you know, if any baseball to watch is baseball. I mean, you can take anything. It's professional. They're good. I mean, just watching the game is awesome. You know.
I guess
That,
adding on. Sorry, Brian, I didn't
I
mean
was
to
going
cut
to
you
just
off.
say that's the league Manny Ramirez played in after he retired from MLB when he was facing that 50-game suspension, the CPBL. Just in case anyone remembers that from about 9 years ago. But go ahead. You had something probably more valid to say.
Well, based on that, I know you mentioned, yeah, you have the Japanese Baseball League. You also have the Korean Baseball League. Given that the MLB is on hold right now, do you think that these other leagues overseas would become a little more popular? People would start to notice, and then once this is all over, then they would still maybe even continue to watch them?
Yeah, I think they're gaining popularity even when the Major League Baseball season's open, because I know that Japanese league is very popular, and a lot of pro guys like they end up going over there. You know, I hear stories about, or there was a kid in the draft last couple years ago that didn't want to go in the draft, and he wanted where he wanted more money, and the Japanese leagues offered him more money. So I mean, I think they're gaining popularity, but you know, this MLB season being postponed, um, I think they could be gaining more popularity.
To kind of circle back to the lack of fans, if MLB is able to get going, and really any sports league, I think we're going to see them start up without fans. But baseball in specific, I know that was the initial plan that Michael Kelly came up with the day after you guys played FAMU, was they're going to keep on keeping on with without fans for the time being. But obviously the conference's decision came down later that day, and that was the end of that. What do you think that experience would have been like? Because it's really, we can look at that Orioles White Sox game in Baltimore from a couple of years ago. It's kind of like a sample of what it would have been, but that was one game. What do you think a season like that would have been like?
I think I feel like it would have slowed down the season a little bit. I mean, you get the fans out there, and you know, you get pumped up with adrenaline, and I feel like the games fly by. You know, I mean, it's a 9-inning game. I'm used to playing 7 in high school, 9 innings long or longer, and then having more fans like that, I mean, it's adrenaline. I mean, you're focused in throughout all times, but I feel like it would slow the game down for sure. Because I mean, you play for the fans, right? You play for your family, you play for your school. So, you know, just having that whole mentality, I feel like makes the game go by quick.
All right, you mentioned it earlier that you were playing a little bit of the show. What's your team? What's your go-to team that you play as?
Go to right now. I mean, I play a lot of Diamond Dynasty on the show. So right now, I mean, if I had to pick a go-to team, probably the Twins or the Nationals for sure.
Okay, respectable.
Loaded with bombers, they got Nelson Cruz and Josh Donaldson. But the Nationals, you know, you can't deny Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg.
I'm going to look dumb. What is Diamond Dynasty mode? I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
So it's basically you're just building your team from the bottom up. I mean, you earn players, and each player has a different rating, and you know, they cost more, or you have to play more to earn them. That's basically what it is.
So it's how does it differ from like franchise mode?
So basically, it's more like an online thing. So you're playing against players online. But yeah, I don't play much of it, so I just play when I can. But I know my brother Jake plays a lot. But I mean, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch him play.
So obviously, you know, that brings up a pretty good question. Obviously, you had baseball to kill a lot of your time up until about a month or so ago. How have you been killing free time? Netflix, video games? What have you been doing?
Actually, here, we have a weight set and a rack and everything in the back of my house. So I get my workouts in, you know, every day. My younger brother catches for the high school, so you know he's used to catching me, so I can still throw, you know, bullpens and flat grounds. So that's awesome. You know, he's a huge blessing. My dad is currently still working. You know, he does kitchen and bathroom remodels, so I mean his business is still going. So I was helping him this week, and then I mean video games, but I can only take so much of it.
Yeah.
Before, you know, I just go stir crazy.
We talked with a softball pitcher, Georgina Korik, a while back, and we asked how her workout plan was. And she said, honestly, the extent of it is just me taking my dog to the park and going kayaking. And she said that this is kind of like a time for her to just catch her breath a little bit and hang out and spend time with family. And have you been taking it as something like that? I know you said you kind of worked out a little bit, but
a little bit, but you know, I feel like this is a big time. You know, I mean, this is a big time to gain. Gain weight, get stronger, to come back even throwing harder and better than I was in the earlier this year. So I mean, I feel like if I don't use this time to, get better and work on things, then I feel like I'd be that much more behind when I come back.
Adding on to that, have you had any sort of contact with any of your coaches or Billy in particular?
Yeah, we have meetings, team meetings every Tuesday, so that's nice to have. And then we branch off into smaller groups once a week for about half hour. We talk, we talk about what's going on and what are new updates, and then we just have just talking about whatever comes to mind.
Is it kind of like nice to be able to do something like that? Because I think we hear the term social distancing, and it was kind of a misleading term at first because, we can still be social with one another even if we're cooped up inside our house. Is it kind of nice to at least still be able to see your teammates and, not necessarily face to face, but you can still see their faces?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very important because I mean, we hold each other accountable, and I mean, just having that accountability behind you that those guys are still there for you, and just thinking about it, really helps. But just meeting with them, and you kind of remembers like, it kind of reminds you that you still have schoolwork, you still have to work out or get your work in any way you can. Even though that this is going on, you could still stay away from people and get your work in.
Well, how is that schoolwork going? Because I know a lot of people have had their difficulties with the transition.
It's a little different. I only have 2 classes that are in class, and they're not really test based. It's just a few papers, papers and stuff, writing. So I'm not really having a difficult time transitioning.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You're a health science major?
Yeah,
Is that what you're? How is that? How are your classes been basically? Have you had any sort of like labs or anything that you had to do virtually or?
No, not really. One of the classes was online already, and the lab's online. So I mean, that's pretty easy because it's been online, the whole year. But no, the classes have been pretty easy. It's pretty normal. Just you just have to get the mentality of taking 4 online classes.
All right, Jack Jasiak, we appreciate you taking a few minutes of your time. Stay safe, stay healthy. We hope to see you back on the field, hopefully next spring, hopefully with fall ball, honestly, first. Hopefully that doesn't get affected too. But regardless, we wish you well, and then hope we'll see you next February.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Jack.
Thank you, you too.
That's our show for the week. This has been week 4 of the Oracle Sports Social Distancing Podcast. I can't believe we got through 4 weeks of this already. Feels like just yesterday we were worried about waking up in the morning, or was that just me?
Probably just you. I was fine. For me, it was waking up at a decent time.
Yeah, the day before we recorded this, so we're recording this on Wednesday of this week. So, wow, this is really going to sound like make me look like a bum because this was on Tuesday I'm about to tell you about. I woke up at 2:30, was up for about 2:30 p.m. I was up for about an hour watching TV. Was on the couch, was like, oh, this sucks. Whatever I was watching. I think it was like the 1996 World Series. Not that it sucked, but it was like being awake sucked. Rolled over on the couch and slept another hour and a half. And then I was surprised when I couldn't get to bed at a decent hour to wake up and do this podcast, which we started recording at 1 o'clock. So that's how my quarantine's going. Hope everyone's doing a little bit better than me.
What time did you get up today?
11:45.
Oh, that's not bad. Not too shabby.
I took that hour getting ready and having breakfast. So now the question will be, what am I going to do after I hit stop recording? Am I going to be smart and like do some work, stay up, maybe at the very least watch TV? Or am I going to, lie down on this couch and sleep for another 2 hours? That's the real question about how the rest of my week's going to play out.
See, no one's judging you because we're all stuck at home. So you just got to get creative. And if your creative is falling asleep on the couch, then hey, man, no one's judging.
I'm judging. I think everyone should judge me. And it's only going to get worse once the semester's over and there's nothing to get up for. So, but we still have another week. I think actually we might actually have 2 more of these. I know we initially said 5 at the onset, but I think we were gifted another week of this semester by our bosses. So, yay!
You get to see our mug. You get to see our mugs for 2 more weeks.
I think more, great? Yay, we have to find 2 more guests instead of 1. Yay. But we'll worry about that when time comes. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next week. Stay safe and stay inside.